Hello, welcome back. My name is Daniel Gormally. Welcome back to my channel, A Hometown Chess Hero. So today I thought we'd do something slightly different, which is we're going to cover the London Chess Classic and look at some of the games. So let's have a little look. Let's see what's going on. Obviously the first game that screams out at me is kind of an obvious example. Well, actually, one of the games, we'll come back. I was thinking about Adams versus Gukesh. It screams out at me as a very interesting game, but this game seems to be well into wow. So I'm presuming this is a huge amount of theory, and it looks like it's going to probably result in a fairly quick draw, right? So what is yeah? I mean, one thing you notice with these top guys is they do know a tremendous amount of theory. You have to play at that level. You have to know all the latest fashions. You know, what's trending as an opening, what's a good opening, how to meet this. For example, this line, I looked at this years and years ago. It first started becoming popular like back in the 2000s, right? E4. Back in the day, they'd always go A3. So you can kind of cop out and play D6. There's other ways to play. I think Short versus Karpov is an early example in this line, where white just plays E4. He's not concerned about bishop takes, just take out the board. Obviously, you don't want to take out the queen because you lose the central pawns. But the way to really meet that opening is to go D5, because then you're putting the pressure in the centre. So now white almost always plays E5. And you get this line, there's a lot of theory on this. And I remember Kasparov talking about how he had to update his theory in this line and stuff like that. And, you know, even though he was retired actually, already by that point. So I just moved this across a little bit because I'm over the board. There's a way to hide the chat actually, because I find the chat a little bit annoying. So in this position, still theory. Yeah, this is all some kind of theory. Actually, Queen H4 is not always played, but yeah, very popular move. So the problem is that, you know, again, with a lot of mainline openings, is how do you get an advantage? You know, black knows what they're doing here. You've only got plus 0.1. It's not enough to win the game. But black still needs to know the theory G5. Niemann is a massive theory hound. You know, he works very hard on chess. He was talking about that. About how he was doing 10 hours a day and, you know, would only sort of go to the front door for Uber Eats, live off Uber Eats. I've never used Uber Eats. Has anyone in you know, watching this channel ever used Uber Eats? I've never used Uber Eats. I've never even used Uber. I know friends of mine used Uber. I don't use Uber. I'm like a dinosaur, right? So takes, yeah, so still theory. It's really chess is dead now. Like classical chess is dead. Because if you know what you're doing, then you can kind of prep all this up, right? So still some kind of theory. I don't know what else can, yeah, there are other moves you can take on D7, but I guess it kind of leads as a similar thing, right? And it's not an advantage for white. So effectively, he tested Hand's theory. You could argue this game as some kind of like tacit draw offer, right? Or, you know, like just getting a rest day. I think there's probably going to be a rest day tomorrow. Is there a rest day in this tournament? I'd imagine there would be. Very few of these very top tournaments have no rest days at all. So I would be surprised if there was not a rest day at some point. I think there should be more rest days in chess because I think it's actually very, very tiring to play chess to a high level. That's just my opinion. But yeah, they agreed draw because it's basically a draw position. Opposite colour bishops. Even if black was missing a pawn on the queen side, it would probably still be a draw. Because you wouldn't be able to win. You haven't got enough to win on the king side. Black will just go h6. You can't break through with the f pawn because black is controlling the f6 square. So that is one of the reasons why these kind of endings are drawn, because it's to do with control. You know, white cannot control the dark squares. Black can. Black cannot control the white squares. White can. But obviously in this position the black king is much more passive than the white king, so a lot of people would play on here, but the problem is you could play on but you would never make progress. Because you could, even if you were able to bring the king to e6, so black could just go h6, king f6. Bring the king to e6, you still can't win because, as I said, if you go f5, f6, the black bishop will just take on f6. So that game is a draw, but there's still a lot of chess left, thankfully. It could be a quiet day today. Often you have games before the rest day are quiet. You know, we're heading up to Christmas. Maybe the players want to get, you know, they're in the middle of London. Maybe they want to go to like Harrods or something and get a little bit of early Christmas shopping in. They want to go to Selfridges, boogie down to Selfridges, right? I used to like going to Selfridges when I was living in London because I'm kind of like, you know, if Ferrugia was playing, he'd be hitting like Bond Street because they've got a lot of fashion stores there. But he's not playing. Adams versus Gukesh. So I was doing a little bit of research on Gukesh. Well, not really research, but I looked him up on Wikipedia. He was born 29th of May 2006. Does that make him a Taurus? Might just be a Taurus, right? Or what's the one after Taurus? I'm a Taurus. I was born 4th of May. And we got a similar kind of DG as well. We're both DG. So, other than that, that's where the similarities end, right? He's like 2,700 and going up in the world. A chess prodigy. He's the third youngest player in history, a person in history, to qualify for the title of Grandmaster. Wow, that's, yeah. So I think the ones ahead of him would be Mishra and Karyakin. Gukesh was born on 29th of May in Chennai. So Chennai, when it was under British rule, would have been called something else, I think. Possibly Madras. His father, not sure about this pronunciation, Nikamth, is an ear, nose and throat surgeon. Nice. So quite a good background, actually, you know, like middle class at least. And his mother, Padma, is a microbiologist. So he's got a kind of health background. Learned to play chess at the age of 7. Yeah, it's kind of a good age to learn. That's similar to when I learned. So not too young. Some kids already, when they're 7, are like phenomenally good. Studied at Gukesh won under 9 section, the Asian school. Yeah, very impressive. He's just been very impressive all throughout his career. It's very hard to say who is the most promising Indian player. A lot of people think Pragg, which I would, yeah, quite possibly agree with. But I think the closest challenger would be Gukesh, I think. You know, partly based on what he did at the Chess Olympiad. He got a phenomenal score with 8 out of 8. And that really showed his huge potential, I think. Became the youngest player to beat Magnus Carlsen. Yeah, I think Gukesh, you know, the future is so bright. He did, however, have a horrible loss yesterday. So can we have a look at that? Round 4, yeah, the horrible loss. Quickly have a look at that game. So anyone who hasn't seen that game, if we hide the moves, maybe hide the moves and just show you where the blunder was. That's the number of people just looking at this round, and you know, there's 38 people, 37 people looking at this round. So I really like the way Gukesh played the opening. The middle game was really nice, interesting position. Black's king is suddenly looking very exposed here, right? The g-file's open. On the other hand, you are controlling a lot of squares. I wondered if Black could just go knight h5 and g6 actually during the game, but yeah, and I like the fact that White started hoovering. Apparently that was quite a bad move. I don't know what Black should have played instead of that. It really looks like Black's not doing great, right? Maybe you should challenge this bishop, because I think the dark squares would be very important here. So I wonder if bishop f6. We'll come back to that moment, but sort of show the blunder that White made. Very un-Gukesh-like, but he's kind of out of form because he did badly in the Isle of Man tournament, so he's kind of lost a little bit of confidence. You know, you start to doubt it. I think it's a pressure-based thing. I think, you know, there's pressure suddenly, there's candidates on the horizon, there's, you know, it seems very open now, the whole chess world, because Magnus is no longer wanting to be world champion, or doesn't want to go down that path anymore. And there's also, it's unclear who's going to be world number 2 in the coming years. And potentially maybe even take over Magnus as world number 1. I mean, Fabi would obviously be a contender, Nakamura. Then you look at other people like Pragananda as well, Abdul Sattarov, Vincent Keimer, Parham Magsudlu. They're all like contenders. And Gukesh would enter that conversation as well, right? So there's a lot of pressure. Firouzja, I should have mentioned as well. Firouzja, I mean, he's had a bad year, but he's still full of potential, right? Yeah, so up to this point, White has done absolutely everything correctly. Here he makes a monumental blunder. I think what he should do is just go Queen d4. And you will eventually start to consolidate. I'm not sure what Black plays. Probably after Queen d4, he might have been slightly concerned that Black would go Queen e7. And then line up some kind of bishop a3, but apparently it doesn't really help him much. But instead he plays a terrible blunder which basically cost him the game. Rook d2. Completely overlooking bishop takes d6. Bishop a3, sorry. Bishop takes a3. And suddenly you sit there and you like the horrible, you know, that's why chess can be a very painful game. You played a great game up to this point. One careless move and the game is effectively over. You know, chess is always, I was comparing it to something like heavyweight boxing. Is you can outbox your opponent for like so many rounds. And then right at the end, you collapse, and then, you know, they knock out, they knock you out. Bishop takes a3 is effectively the knockout punch. Because if you take with a queen, the problem is when they go rook a8, you're in big trouble. You can't move the queen because of rook a1, mate. Other than moving the queen somewhere along the a file. And the only other move is desperate looking bishop a7. I think that must be losing for several reasons. I mean, one thing you could just do, I guess, is just go here, right? And if I go here rather than, well, I could exchange actually. I could just ruthlessly go there. Because you can't take because of the mate. I was also thinking rook a7 was also good because rook a7, queen c7, rook a1. I played Moussard before. He's a very good player, very talented player. From France. I think he was a good junior as well. So yeah, effectively that was the end of the game, and Gukesh, there are lines here which just give Black a huge edge, but you could maybe stumble on in some kind of awkward way, but obviously Gukesh would have realised that's losing, so he's playing lines to kind of force him to find good moves, but this is too easy for a top class player. Knight e6 is a really obvious move. And then bishop takes, and then d4, and that's like game over, right? Yeah, and then he just took a very nice clean up. They're going to clean up from here, these top guys. If you take with a king, apparently rook d8 is very good. Lots of winning moves. Knight f4 is probably winning. He took with a pawn, and knight d4 is a nice finishing move, because the point is if you take on e5, go knight f3, end up being a piece up and a pawn up and piece pawn up. You're not going to defend that. If you don't take the queen, I'm threatening stuff like queen a5 and mate, and I can't escape this way. So Gukesh decided to resign. But how's he getting on today? This is the interesting question. Let's cheer for Gukesh. I like Gukesh. There's something about him seems quite sympathetic. But we like Adams because Adams is our best player, right? Probably the best player over the last 20 odd years in British chess. Even going even further back, I think going back to the 1990s. I first heard about Adams from a guy who played for Charlton Chess Club. And I was at a match, and he was telling me about this guy, Michael Adams. He said, you know, he's going to become like the youngest British player to become a GM. So at that time I would have been like early teens, maybe 12 or something like 12 or 13. And Adams, I think, was born 1970, 1971. So he'd be like 5 years older than me, right? So he would have been 17, 18 when he won the British title, around about that point when I was first getting into chess. Adams was already winning like the first of many British titles. And he's effectively dominated British chess for many, many years, and he's just a phenomenally good player. He's just got very, very good positional skills, very, very solid player. Rarely makes big mistakes. So how's this game going? So I like analysing games without an engine. If we look at the study, can we make a study of this, or how do we make a study? Maybe I have to use ChessBase next time, but let's think about what are the candidate moves for white here. What would white be thinking about playing here? I really have no idea. I mean, I'm not an I don't play this kind of position for white or for black. So if we look at the opening, it went very typical that Adams relies on his bishop b5. He knows his bishop b5 very, very well. He's played it on many occasions. However, I don't believe that if black knows what he's doing, he can get any advantage. But that's true. We saw that in the Neiman game, you know, and that was mainline theory. So he's just trying to get a position. He feels he can outplay people. Knight g6 is a nice move. Often the knight will go to g6 in this variation. And he went knight d4, which is a new move. So already we're out of theory. He's taken. So now, yeah, well, the first thing you look at when you're trying to assess a position, I guess. I'm not a super GM like Michael Adams is, but I'm a grandmaster, so I should have some idea of how to play chess a little bit. Is what are your candidate moves? What is your plan as well? What is your plan? Do you have a plan? This is another thing. So you think about your candidate moves. I mean, so that's the first thing I do. I look at, you know, I think about my candidate moves. So what is white's candidate moves here? I mean, one move is maybe to play c4, right? You could play c4. I often get a bit paranoid. You know, when I make a move on the board like this, I wonder if that actually makes the move on their board in real life, right? So suddenly Adam's like, wow, I never wanted to play c4, right? c4 kind of makes sense because you're increasing your control over the d5 square, but I don't know really what it does. What other moves make sense? f4, not really, because knight takes. Oh, but hang on a minute, the c6 is dropping. Maybe f4 you would have to consider b5. If the bishop drops back, then I can probably take on f4 and win a pawn. Well, there is queen g3, so you could maybe consider something like this. But then there's always e5, right? So I don't really believe that variation. So what other counter moves have we got? Have we got knight d2? So will white consider knight d2? Just develop a piece. Bishop e3 is another developing move, right? It seems to me whatever white plays, black has quite a comfortable position. Another thing you could consider doing is maybe going g3 and cramping that knight on g6. So that the knight is denied f4, but on the other hand the knight can always jump into e5. And some playing of g3 and f4 is double-edged because it's very weakening. So I said a book that I wrote, which hasn't been released yet, and I said, you know, Super GM level, they seem to sort of like almost communicate this secret code. You know, they always seem to find the right plan, the right moves. I think just because they understand chess very well, they've studied it very deeply, they've got that level of ability, so they've done everything correctly. They've got a huge amount of talent. All these guys are very talented, very naturally gifted, and they've studied chess very deeply. And they're also, they know how to so they've got a lot of knowledge, right? So they've got, you know, knowledge is very important, and they know how to calculate very well. So effectively, then you get this kind of almost like a language that they understand. The thread I called it in the position. What is the thread? You know, I'm sure Adams has an idea of what he would play here. I mean, so I'm going back to this C4 move just because I want to put the knight on C3. Rather than D2, right? Somehow knight D2 doesn't feel totally comfortable there. I mean, is there maybe B5 and then the white bishop? You know, if you go here, it looks a little bit awkward with C5 maybe coming. You go here, then do I go here and maybe argue that I'm very comfortable? Yeah, I feel like Gukesh is one of these super talents, right? He's just phenomenally gifted. He's like, you know, Anand Mark II. Same with Pragananda. And they can outplay with white or with black. But here, yeah, it seems like black has a comfortable game to me. I feel like bishop d6 is coming, castles is coming, bishop b7. Black's position is brimming with potential. So I quite like Gukesh's chances in his position. I'll be slightly uncomfortable with a bishop here. Once black gets all those moves in bishop d6 castles, bishop b7, is that bishop on a great square, but it can come back to c2, and then white, if white can get an f4, then he will avenge, you know, g3 and f4. So I think white will be looking at moves like g3, maybe not immediately, but at some point. Okay, we'll come back to that game anyway. Let's talk about this game as well. Also a very interesting encounter between Luke McShane, who I believe is from southwest London, like Clapham area originally. And our first, you know, we're talking about history, and I first encountered Luke McShane when he was very young, actually. And I used to bunk off school to go to Old Cheston Bridge Centre, which was in Clapham Junction, and it was in a Mecca bingo hall, and it was run by a guy called Jeremy. You know, his name's escaped me now. It's just really terrible. I'll remember in a minute. It was Jeremy something, I'm sure, but this is before actually they even had the Cheston Bridge Centre, I believe, in Euston, which I believe only really started up in like the 1990s. They used to have rapid plays there as well. So they have rapid plays at the old Chester Bridge Centre. And I played some good players there. And one of the people I played there was Luke McShane. But yeah, they had rapid plays there. They had rapid plays. I remember they even had like a symbol there once with like an old Prime Minister from the past, James Callaghan, took part in that. And there was also a famous actor as well, like Anthony Blunt or something like that. I think he was into chess. Or Anthony Quinn was also like the Greek-Mexican actor. I think maybe he was into chess as well. They were both in the Guns of Navarone. But it was one of those two. But Luke McShane would come along, and he was kind of like our English Gukesh, like phenomenal talent. So again, yeah, they love bishop b5 checks. I think they're scared of mainline theory, right? Or I think Luke McShane is a very positional player. A little bit like Adams, he's very good positionally. He's kind of, I would say, he's slightly more sharper. His style is slightly sharper than Adams, in my opinion. You know, he's more willing, he plays like King's Indians with black and Sicilians. Yeah, so this line I've seen before. I haven't really seen knight d3 because often they just castle. with this idea of giving up this pawn. But d3 is interesting. Yeah, not 91. That's an interesting move. Now black has gone d5 actually. So it's white to play. So Viti Yugov has gone d5, which strikes me as a good move. Viti Yugov is a very good player. Shall we look him up on Wikipedia? Viti, I think he's a former Russian champion. So Nikita Vitiugov, born February 1987. Not sure what star sign that is. Is that? I should know this. Something like Aquarius? No. I don't know. He's a Russian chess grandmaster who internationally represents England as of September 2023. So I think Vitiugov is one of these people who were opposed to the Russia-Ukraine war. Quite rightly. He was a member of the victorious Russian team at the World Team Chess Championships. Yeah. He won the Gibraltar, so he's won Gibraltar, he's won Grenke, and he also won 2021 the Russian Chess Championships. He's under 18, so he's been a good player since a junior, like most good chess players. Most people end up Super GM level, if not all, were good from a very early age, right? Because they've devoted their life to chess to a certain extent. He won the Blue Sevan, that sounds like an interesting tournament, to achieve his last norm required. Yeah, subsequently knocked out Gupta. This is in the FIDE World Cup. Milos played him before as well. I think I might have even played Gupta as well when he was a kid. Lost to Sergei Karyakin. I don't think I've ever played Karyakin over the board. Might have played him online, I don't know, on some secret account. Yeah, it's quite a long thing. He's actually written a couple of books, so check them out as well. I would recommend checking them out. Wasn't aware that he'd written a couple of books. I might have to check those out and buy them on eBay. Well, I normally do. I like this move d5 anyway. d5, that's a really good move because you just really take the centre. I think the problem is that this kind of position I probably understand more because it's more about direct play. And, you know, it's kind of obvious what black would do then. Black would have a good position if you take. So I don't think you take. I think Luke Shane is going to keep the tension in the centre for the time being. But how do you do that? How do you do that? Well, I don't know. You know, this bishop suddenly again, you know, a little bit like the Adams bishop, starting to look a little bit misplaced. Maybe bishop b3 is a move. Or maybe trade first and then go bishop b3 is another option. But the problem here... Okay, firstly you look at checks and captures, right? So you're looking at captures. Either take here or take here. You could push, but I think that's what white wants. Maybe this is what white wants. I don't know. F4 is coming. Still playable for black, but probably not what you would play. I mean, I would certainly look at takes. I think if you take with a bishop, I have b5. I think I've got a very, or even knight e5 actually. I've got a very comfortable game. So I think you take with a pawn. Now, black could consider the move b6, or consider putting a knight in on e5 immediately is also another option. Maybe with a view to bringing the knight to c6 and then coming into d4. Although there's stuff like f4, knight c6, and then maybe knight f3 will be played. And if you go b6 here, maybe I control you with f4 for the time being. So the other option is maybe to bring the bishop back to c2, which is another reasonable option that white has. I think it's quite obvious that what white wants to do, having played knight e1, which is to play f4. So he feels like the way to make progress is to push f4. And then we have some options later on the king's side. So black now goes b6. We now go f4. And if bishop b7... yeah, then we're starting to play a bit. Maybe we could even consider taking and then go e5. So I feel like this Luke Michaud game, I kind of understand it a little bit better than the Adams game, but not by much. Maybe because I've seen kind of similar positions before, but should we have a quick look at the Sheriff's Rule game? Because I think Sheriff's Rule is another player very, very promising. He might even have... Is he on Wikipedia? How do you spell it? S-H-R-E-S. Let's look him up. He might... S-H-R-E-S Royal Chess. He has got some kind of... Sheras was born in India, so he's quite a small profile, but he'll probably become larger as he becomes stronger and stronger, right? So he's born January the 9th, similar kind of early in the year like Vitayugov. Born in Bengaluru, India. He was born in India but moved to South London when his father was offered a job as an IT project manager in the United Kingdom. Yeah. A lot of Asians end up either moving to Europe or to a lot of Indians, I should say, or Chinese, or or people from Asia in general end up moving to Europe or potentially United States because they're very, very good at programming and stuff like that. They've got very good computer skills. He's offered a job as an IT project manager in the United Kingdom. The visa of Royal's father was due to expire in September 2018. He was granted a new work visa 1 month prior, allowing the family to stay and Royal to continue playing chess in England. He's England's youngest international master. Yeah, I remember I actually appeared on a radio show playing against Sheras around about that time. Would have been 2018. And I was interviewed and I said, they said, is Sheras a potential world champion? I said, it's too early because, 7 billion people in this world and there's so many good players. But I think he's shown enough to show maybe he's not a potential world champion, but he's certainly a potential, super grandmaster. And why not? He could get to the very top. I think he does a lot of work on chess every day. I think he's consistently working on chess. So therefore, he's obviously heading to the very top, right? I think getting good at chess is about hard work. So they wanted to stay in England because I think they felt like if they went back to India, he'd be kind of forgotten about. Whereas if he stayed in England, he'd clearly be one of the most promising younger players. Whereas in India, there's other kids who are ahead of him, and therefore he's going to be forgotten about. He's not going to be given the better kind of coaching or the better kind of opportunities. So therefore, it makes more sense for him to stay in England, and maybe they preferred England by that point anyway. So that was a wise decision by them to try and plead the case to try and stay in England, I think. Very clever. And it worked out. And he's now looking very promising, and he's getting an invite to London Classic. So this position does look very theoretical as well. Bishop E7, I've seen this kind of line before. B3 is an excellent move, so that you can take out the pawn. There are other options for white. Yeah, you can take on D5 as well. Knight E4 is a good free move. E6, Rook FC1, G5. So very positional. Again, a little bit like the Adams-Gukesh game. The forces aren't clashing yet, so white now has to come up with a plan. This is the part of the game that I find the most interesting, right? The early middle game, I would say. I find the early middle game the most fascinating. I think partly because I don't really understand it. If you get to an end game, a lot of end games I find interesting as well. But it's kind of, it's like a lot of time it's like study light, it's calculation, it's understanding, it's knowledge. You can kind of get the end game down to a fine art to some extent. The opening phase, a lot of time you know what to do. However, when you get a middle game like this, it's just very unclear what you should be doing, and I find that fascinating. And a lot of it's about personal style, how you approach the position. So what should white play here? I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I mean, I guess B4 is one potential candidate move. I mean, you could think about sticking the knight in on e5 as another idea, but then of course, I mean, I don't think black would take because you would lose the dark squares, but you could just challenge that knight with knight d7, and then what's the problem? So the only drawback of black's position is the fact that he's gone g5. That does weaken the king side a little bit. However, white is not really in a position to exploit that because his pieces are not aggressively placed on the king side. So it's not looking like very likely that white's going to create an attack over there very soon. I mean, one possible plan is knight d2 as well. Knight d2 is appealing to me. So one reason I like that is maybe later on you could consider knight f1 to g3 and then knight h5. Attack the bishop. And you also create, you see what you got, this hole. Black has this hole. So how would the game develop? I guess you'd go knight d7. Now I could also consider f3 maybe to go e4, but what does that do once I drop the bishop back? Or I take the other danger is you take. I mean, I suppose you could try that, but if black just goes knight f6, what are you doing then? I mean, maybe black is considering other moves which are more dynamic as well. Maybe is going to consider trying to take over the attack. This is another possibility. Yes, I really have no idea. I'll be honest, the more I look at some of these chess games, the more I realise I know nothing about chess. And chess is just a horrendously difficult game at the best of times. There are some positions I kind of feel like I understand, but this is not one of them. Don't understand what white should do. I'll probably go b4 here as white in a real game, but actually when I think about it, b4, maybe he just goes here, right? Is knight b6 coming into c4 going to be an issue as well? Maybe b5. Bartel, again, not a player I'm very familiar with. Should we do one last? It's getting a bit boring, all this Wickby Bartel chess, right? I'm not even going to attempt to. I'm not even going to attempt to spell his first name. Matthews. So it's like Matthew, right? He's a Polish chess grandmaster. He won the Polish chess championship. So he's a 4-time Polish chess champion in 2006, 2010, 2011, 2012. Hasn't won it for a lot of years, like 11 years though. Probably hasn't played it that often since then. Bartel learned to play the game at the age of 6 from his father when he and his younger brothers were at home ill with chickenpox. Both Matthias and his brother later entered the chess club Polonia Warsaw. He won the under-18 European Championships in 2003. Very impressive. 2005, Bartel finished equal first with Sultan Gimeshi in the inaugural EU Individual Open Chess Championships in Cork. Very interesting. He also tied first in Isle of Man. And yeah, I imagine he's played. Oh, he won the bronze. Yeah, he's won the normal. We're talking about the individual. He's also won a normal European Chess Club Cup in Rhodes. Oh no, sorry, but he's probably played in the European individual, right? Yeah, he won the bronze at the European Individual Championship in Jerusalem. I forgot actually that they hosted it in Israel, because Israel you'd kind of think is part of Asia as well, right? Or it's in the Middle East, but technically it's strange to have it in, because I wouldn't have thought Israel is part of Europe, but they had it in Israel. Sebastian qualified, yeah, that dates back to something else that happened. So he's obviously good. How old is he? 85, so he's 9 years younger than me. Hang on, what happened there? So we lost it there for a minute. Yeah, going back, have we had any more moves in Adam's game? We have. Actually, very interesting developments. Knight d4. And he went e5. Not a move I even consider. This is why I'm not a super GM, right? Well, very obvious that if you take here, this is a very easy line to calculate. You take the rook, and when you go queen e1 at the end, you just go queen f1. So that's... I have actually seen moves like e5. I remember there was an old Kasparov game where he played e5 and it was a genuine pawn sat. Here it's not actually a genuine pawn sat. But it's a good space gainer. Knight d2, excellent move by Adam. So I like what he's done because he's denied this bishop the excellent square on d6, which I was struggling to really play White's position. So excellent space gaining move, and this is one of the things that super GMs look out for, ways to gain space. On the other hand, Black's position still looks okay. So why can't you take the pawn now? Because there's no bishop c6 anymore, right? I think you go queen g3, this is the idea. If you go here, then I guess I take, right? Although this doesn't look 100% clear to me. I'll be slightly concerned here as white. Although, actually, no, if we carry on that, there's knight e4. There is a knight f3 check though, knight f3. If you take, I go rook g8. If you don't take, you lose the rook. I can't go there. However, I do have other moves. You know, I can move the queen, for example. But then you're going to get the rook g8 and you're going to get c5 and you're going to... Yeah, so... Why can't he take the pawn now? Maybe this is what Gukesh is weighing up. Because if you don't take the pawn, I feel like you're worse, right? I feel like you're going to go here and then knight f3. Well, knight f3 maybe. We've had more moves. Yeah, it's kind of what I expected actually. d5, but the bishop dropped back. He kept the tension, and he went bishop c2, which is a good move. Yeah, so I think Louis McShane is he's a very I would say unique player, McShane, in the sense that he likes to go his own way. You know, and he likes to play quite slowly. I think sometimes he likes to keep the game tense. This Adams game, should we just check the engine? I think I might end about there, but let's just check the engine evaluation in the Adams game. So you can't take the pawn because of queen g3, and then here, knight e4 probably, yeah, knight e4 busted. So the best move is rook d8. And actually, there were other moves. I mean, you know, if you play knight c4, that's not very good. Knight d2, not great. Louis McShane, what's the engine eval there? Equal. No, slightly better for black, actually. Very comfortable position. Well, the Sheriff's Royal game, he has gone knight d2. That was the move I was suggesting. Quite a comfortable position for white. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to end there. Thanks a lot for watching. Goodbye.